something that somebody told me, I don't know, 5-6 years ago that really stuck with me is you can live in the past or you can live in the future, but you can't live in both. And so, if you're asking yourself, how do I become a better partner of management? Start with the answer, start with where you want to be, and then work backwards from there.
This episode is brought to you by Greenskies Analytics, an audit analytics service provider that works with internal audit departments that have data analysts and are still frustrated with trying to make analytics actually work, aren't getting the expected ROI, who can't break through the communication barrier between the analysts and the audit team, and those that need experienced direction for an audit analytics strategy and process. Those that feel like they've wasted time and money on trainings, aren't getting the value they want, not prioritizing the highest risk areas for the organizations, or have projects that seemingly never get completed. Do you deal with any of that? If you do, go to the show notes of this episode and click the Greenskies Analytics link, or go to greenskiesanalytics.com to schedule a call and understand how Greenskies Analytics makes analytics actually work for internal audit.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Audit Podcast. I'm your host, Trent Russell. Today on the show, we have Eric Wilson. He is the Chief Audit Executive at Gulfport Energy. We hit on a lot of different topics, and Eric does a really, really good job of kind of crushing every answer that we talk about. Some of the things we hit on, though, is the use of analytics in audit, how Eric is using that. So what he's actually doing, so not just like thought leadership around this topic. And from that, we kind of segue into how he preps for his audit committee meetings. And within that, he talks about this dashboard that he had built. So this kind of goes back to the analytics piece within audit. So the dashboard that he built that he shares with the audit committee, his protocol for sharing that conversation, we take a little bit of a deep dive on, and you give them access to the dashboard so that they can look at it on their own time and they can start digging around and basically bugging you with questions all the time. Or do you take the screenshot, throw it in the deck for the audit committee to see, and how he balances that? But then Eric also pulls up a screen and shares his dashboard. So if you're watching the YouTube version of this episode, you'll be able to see that. It's towards the end of the episode. Note that during the recording, it was the actual live version of the dashboard at that point in time. Considering the nature, sensitivity of the data, things like that, I'm sure the organization wouldn't want that to be publicly available. So the image you're going to see is from the dashboard, but it is a scrubbed down version of that in terms of hiding numbers and the sensitive material that you wouldn't want to be out there if you were in Eric's organization's shoes. So anyway, it's a good look at that. Look at it, get some ideas, go to your audit committee and go, hey, there's this dashboard. And they show their audit committee this, and this. Is there any of this that you want to see from us, or any insights you would want relative to kind of what you're seeing here and how we could give those to you? So it's always a good example. I love telling people that. Take a dashboard from somebody else, show it to your audit committee, and go, if you want any of this, we can get it to you in some form or fashion, depending on if you can build the dashboard or however else you can get that to them. We also talk about emerging tech. You'll probably pick up on it pretty quick with Eric. Very much in the know on the tech scene, what is out there currently and what's coming out. And so we asked him about emerging tech, what he's seeing, not necessarily predictions, but he talks about this, the way of looking at emerging tech for him is in a 1 to 3 year period, 3 to 5 year period, and then 5+ years. And so he hits on robots as being the 1 to 3, like, hey, they are here. Like right now we have those. They are around. They are going to impact the business. Goes into a little bit of detail about how they might impact you, your audit department, or your organization. He talks edge computing as the 3 to 5 years, although some of that is here right now also. And then quantum computing and what that's going to mean for the future. Again, that's more of like 5+ years from Eric's perspective. And then we also talk about why we should be more commercially focused on our audits. So instead of just, hey, here's an issue, now you're in trouble, looking at it from more of a commercial lens. A lot of the times we talk about that as the opportunity side of audit as opposed to the risk side. And Eric refers to it very appropriately also as the commercial side of things. So with that said, here we go. All right, Eric, you said your ChatGPT history is pretty extensive, somewhat to the extent that you're like probably overuse it potentially. So very interested to hear any novel use cases that you've been using ChatGPT for, or Llama, Claude, anything, whatever, any of the LLMs. work or personal?
Work-wise, we've got an internal system that we use, Copilot. But I pulled up ChatGPT here, and I was just scrolling through my list. So I got where I've asked ChatGPT to help me write a prompt for another AI system. That was a fun one. I took a picture of a chipped sink and asked it how to fix it. Music questions for helping my kids with their homework. How to structure a crypto arbitrage program. So yeah, I got a whole list of stuff going over here.
Yeah, that crypto arbitrage, that sounds super interesting. What was the 10-second answer on that one?
It was very interesting and way more involved. It was one of those 2 a.m. great ideas, and then I typed it in. I was like, yeah, I don't have time for this.
Yeah, I had that. It was something to do. I was reading some book about like the history of the universe or something like that.
Yeah.
And of course, I forget the math now, but it was like, it's estimated that there's like 150 trillion stars in the galaxy, of the solar system, and like 389 trillion planets or something like that. And so I found like some formula, and I basically said like, hey, this is what had to happen for life to happen on Earth, considering everything
What's the
else that's
likelihood?
out there. Like, what are the odds? And so it did this whole thing. I mean, like it looked like Rain Man, it was like writing these calculations out. I didn't understand any of it. And so I did all this, and I was like, all right, so to summarize, what are the odds? And it was like 0.000000000, whatever, 1%. And I went, okay,
Yeah.
interesting. And then later learned that ChatGPT, it doesn't really do math that great. So it's probably
No, the new version is pretty good, but the older version's not so much. But that's a deep rabbit hole to go down there when you start looking at that stuff.
Yeah, that was one that I was reading it in the book, and I like highlighted it and text myself or like emailed myself, like, try this tomorrow and play around with it. So, all right, well, I like how to fix the sink. I had an oven issue, and I saw where somebody else did that, took a picture of the issue, and then noted like make and model, and then said like, how do I fix this? And it said, oh, this part's probably broken. Here's a link to you can go buy this part.
Yep.
That wasn't the issue with mine, but it was cool.
That's exactly what it did for me. Made it much more easier than what I was planning to do.
Yeah. All right. I like those. I appreciate that. The home repair stuff, I think, is pretty fascinating because I know historically it's been like go to YouTube, watch a 50-minute video and only watch 3 minutes of it, which inevitably means I'm going to make multiple trips to Home Depot. I'm never going to get it fixed on the first try because I'm not watching a 50-minute video. So I like that. All right. I know in our previous conversations, we've talked about analytics and how you have that in your audit process. And of course, like we'll hit on AI as well, but how do you have analytics embedded into the life cycle of any given audit?
So I probably should get some background on my audit department. When I came over to Gulfport Energy, one of the decisions that we made was, were we going to staff up this department, or were we going to have it just as a single person department where I have consultants and contractors in place that I use for different projects? And that's the route that we ended up going with. So being a single person department, I live, eat, breathe analytics all day, because there's no way that I could operate this department without that. So I have an audit management tool that I use, and within that audit management tool, there is integrated Power BI, and I've built out custom dashboards for our SOX program, for tracking our findings, for our operational audits, for management action plans, for document requests. And so, the goal originally was I need to get my arms around what's happening within the department. What's nice now is I've actually gotten to the point where I get in the office, and within 10 minutes, flipping through those dashboards that I built, I've got a great idea of where the department's at, what I need to focus on for the day, what questions I need to be asking people. And then the other thing it does is it creates for me a dashboard that I use with our management team and that I use with our audit committee. So I will literally screenshot this dashboard, put it in my audit committee deck. That's what goes up to them. And so it makes my life much more efficient, much easier. I wouldn't be able to do the level of auditing and the amount of audits that we do without more personnel if I didn't have the analytics in place that we're using every day.
Hey everybody, we'll get back to the guests, but real quick, just wanted to let you know, block your calendars for March 5th, 2025. If you attended the Audit Analytics and AI conference back in the fall, we're going to do a mini Audit Analytics and AI conference on March 5th. So it's going to be from 9 to 4. So we're going to go 9 to 12. Then we'll do an hour break, and then 1 to 4. These are Central Time, so Chicago time zone. All right, so go ahead, block your calendars off, and we'll make the announcement when registration opens. All right, back to the show. So like knowing how deep you are in analytics and competent within that for 2025, do you have a AI or analytics initiative that you're looking to implement?
Yeah, we've got a couple things. So we talked about the analytics that I use within the audit department. The flip of that is the analytics that we use for our auditing. And to date, we've put some analytics in place, but it's been a little bit of a slow process. And the reason why is because Gulfport, being like many companies that were formed more than 5 years ago, we didn't structure our data in a way that was designed to be used for data analytics. So Gulfport, I mean, we're coming up on 30 years that we've been in operation now. We've got data in multiple locations, multiple systems. They don't feed to a central location. So it's very difficult to create a robust analytics on data while you're auditing if you're in that environment. And that's not unique to us. That's most companies I've ever worked for, they're in the same boat. So our goal for 2025 as a company is to start doing some consolidation of data. And as we do that, I'm going to provide input as to here's what I need to be able to do automated testing. Here's what others are going to need to be able to do data analytics. And then really start rolling that out. And then the other thing I want to do is I really want to get to where I'm starting to leverage AI more. So I'm one of the guinea pigs in the company using AI to support my audit function. So far, it hasn't been in anything related to core audit activities, more ancillary. But in 2025, I do want to start working into using AI more for actual audit work, supporting the audit function. And so far this year, we're early on. There's been a couple things that I've been able to do that I think are going to make a huge difference in our efficiency and effectiveness.
So 2025 is kind of the year of data governance for you all, and let's get this thing in a position to where, I don't know, 2026, 2027, you can really start to take advantage of AI solutions like, hey, our data is legit now. It's in good shape. We can rely on it, complete accuracy, security audit stuff. Now we're about to start taking off.
Yeah, absolutely. But I would also tell people, if you're in a similar situation, a lot of people look at their data structure and they say, well, it's all over the place. It's really difficult for us to use it. So we're not going to start doing analytics, or we're not going to apply AI. You can still use analytics and AI. It may be in a more limited use case. One of the things that I'm doing this year, our company, it's very technical in nature in what we do. And so we do operational audits. One of the audits we're doing this year is drilling and completions. Very technical, lots of engineering that goes into it. So I'm going to send my audit team out to do that. Most of those auditors have no background in drilling and completions. And so just yesterday, I went into to Copilot and I said, hey, we got this audit coming up. Build me a primer that I can give to my audit team that explains to them what is drilling and completions, what's the process, what's the key terms and definitions, who's involved. And it built me this, amazing 20-page document that what I'm going to do now is I'm going to send it to the person who's responsible for that area, say, hey, look through this, read it, make sure it's okay. And once they give me the okay, I'm going to give it to the audit team, because we've all been in that situation where we send auditors into an area to audit, and then the person calls you who's over that area an hour later and goes, why are you sending these people to me? They have absolutely no idea what I do and how I do it. So I'm trying to mitigate that a little bit. And just that is a perfect example of where I'm starting to really inject AI into my operation, because I don't have time to build that primer. And if I went to that area and said, hey, can you guys build this for me? They'd go, absolutely not. There's no way we've got time for it. So, 30 minutes, it spit it out and I read through it and I say, this is pretty good. I like it.
It's got to fact check it a little bit with the
Absolutely.
I'm smiling because I've got on another screen, I've got a deck pulled up that I'm working on. And there's just some prompts that I'm going to show some folks for internal audit, specifically for SOX purposes. But I know, I was thinking back, if I would have had this when I started an external audit, which is all SOX, IC audit testing, what would I have used it for the most? And I feel like it was the understanding the business aspect, because I was on a retail client, a logistics client, a bank client, chemical company or something like that. And I was just I had no clue what any of them really did. And even then, I don't have a stout, I'm not a CPA. And so I'd have to, I didn't want to ask the dumb CPA question,
Right.
Don't you work for an accounting firm? Shouldn't you know them? Well, I don't really have that background. And so literally, like one of the bullet points is just understand the business. And I would have loved to have had this to just be able to ask questions about the business and understand how does accounts payable work? Like it's something as simple as that. I didn't know how that worked when I was 21 years old.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's a really, really good use case. And I like that you tacked on the bit about you then sent it to the experts. Said, hey, basically we did this. Now I need you to review it, fact check it, and make sure that's correct.
Yeah. Yeah,
What,
absolutely.
what about emerging tech? Like you are obviously very in on tech and what's going on. What do you see as, let's call it maybe, well, we're early in 2025. Emerging tech in 2025, 2026, what are you seeing?
So I actually I break emerging tech into really three buckets, and that's the 1 to 3 year, 3 to 5 year, and then 5+ year. And some of the things that are even out there in the 5+ year, I would say that auditors need to start thinking about and getting their arms around, even if it's not going to affect us today. Going back to AI, right? A couple years ago, AI, nobody was talking about it, and then late 2022, early 2023, ChatGPT came out, and all of a sudden it was everything, right? I mean, I just went through all the prompts that I use. I didn't have that 2 years ago to be able to leverage, and we're seeing more and more the integration of AI into systems. So this is one of the conversations I have with auditors a lot. Is we're in companies that we say, well, we don't use AI. Well, yeah, you do, because maybe you haven't officially rolled out AI, but there's a lot of systems that you use where those providers are integrating AI into their systems. And every employee who walks through your door brings a phone with them, and that phone has ChatGPT. If it's a Google phone, it's got Gemini, it's got all these different things on it. So you do have AI in your company, and it is being used, whether or not you know it and whether or not you want it to be, it is being used. And so I really think, even though some of these technologies are a ways out, we need to start thinking about them today because they're going to be big, big technologies. And so, I mean, I could probably list off a laundry list of technologies that I think are important, but I guess let's do this. If it's okay with you, I'll just pick one from each of those buckets. And
Yeah,
we can talk about them real quick. So the one that I've been thinking about a lot recently.
and then summarize your buckets again. You had 1 to 3. What was your bucket?
Yeah, 1 to 3, 3 to 5, and then
Yeah.
5+ years.
Yeah.
One of the ones that I think is going to hit us really quick as a society, and then also business wise, is AI driven autonomous robotics. So now, if I had said this 5 years ago, I probably would have said this sounds ridiculous. Yet today, I came to the office in a car where I pulled out of my driveway and I didn't touch the steering wheel, the brakes, or the gas pedal until it parked itself in the parking lot here, right? So here we are, right? And it's very, very good, and it's getting better literally month to month. So this is something that I think is going to be on the horizon and integrating into business pretty quickly. So you think about that, and there's all kinds of things that, from an audit perspective, we have to think about. One is, ethical considerations of job replacement and whatnot. There's employment law. There's labor considerations. There's massive tax implications of how, you start putting. If you have a production line and you say, I'm going to take my employees and I'm going to start replacing them with robotics. How do we tax that? Is the government going to look at that as an employee, or is it going to look at it as an asset? So lots of things go into that have to be considered. And again, it sounds really far out there, but I read something the other day about how the market for this is about $4 billion in 2024. By 2034, it should be $40 billion on the low end. And then if you talk to, or if you listen to people at NVIDIA or Tesla or all these different companies that are building this stuff, they're talking about by 2030, this is a multi-trillion-dollar business. And so I think it's going to come fast. I think it's going to hit us very quickly. And so again, as auditors, we really need to start putting our heads around this and thinking about how are we going to audit these things and how are we going to look at them and the technologies that come with them as we start to roll them out in business and industry. So that would be the short-term one. Longer term, or that midterm, the 3 to 5 years. Something that I was reading about the other day is a process called edge computing. So edge computing, in the last 10 years, we've seen a lot of things move from on-premises to cloud, right? So you're moving it away from your organization. You're moving it further away from the actual person sitting at the desk. Well, edge computing goes the other direction, right? So think about, I've got a workforce that's now 100 robots or 500 robots or whatever. Each one of these has processing power. Each one of them has to work really quickly. Sometimes they're going to be faced with decisions they have to make that their individual processing capability can't handle. And so how do they handle that? Well, they've got 500 processors sitting all right next to each other. What they're going to do is one, compute on system, meaning within the bot, and then all those bots are going to talk to each other and process together. So from a cybersecurity standpoint, from a data management standpoint, how do you look at that and say, okay, now we've got 500 systems that are actually sitting on the production line, all talking to each other, all computing, sharing data back and forth. How do we control that data? How do we make sure the data is being migrated and transferred correctly? And then, what does the backup systems look like? So, edge computing, it exists today. Again, going back to my example with the car driving me to work today, that's edge computing. It's computing in system, in car, but that's going to scale up tremendously, I think, pretty quickly as we start to see some of these systems go out. And again, going back to some of the research that's out there, 2030, I think that same report said this is probably 110 to 150 billion dollar industry just on the edge computing component part of it, and what goes into that. So that again is something that's going to hit us, and it's moving in the complete opposite direction of what we've seen over the last decade. Rather than pushing out to the cloud, now we're bringing closer to where the decisions actually have to be made. And then the third one that I'll throw out, which is the one that normally when I start talking about, people just kind of get glazed over and cross-eyed. But I think this is one that probably has the potential to have the biggest impact on how we do business and again, just in society. And that is quantum computing. So quantum computing, I would say, you're 5+ years out for it being commercially viable. But when it becomes commercially viable, things that today we can't do, we can't compute, we can't solve, problems that, optimization problems that even the best supercomputer couldn't tackle, it'll tackle instantly. And the reason why I say people need to start thinking about this today is my degree, I'm also not a CPA. I actually have a science degree. And when I was getting my degree, I think in my 4th year, I had to take quantum physics. I didn't understand it. It made no sense to me at all. By the end of the semester, I still walked out of there going, okay, I think I got it. I don't know if I have it. I think the curve in that class was like a 20%. If you had a 20%, you had an A, and then everything below that was, scaled. So the reason why we need to start thinking about this today is because the way that these computers work, number one, is completely different than how a classical computer works. But beyond that, you're going to have to learn and understand terms that most people have never thought of, they've never said. And it works using computational physics that it's not supposed to make sense to us. It works in a way that doesn't apply to our day to day. If I drop a ball, I know that ball is going to fall and bounce off the ground. And quantum, that's not how it works, but that's how these computers work. So it may take people that long to get to where they're wrapping their heads around it and going, okay, I think I know how to have a meaningful conversation around this. And again, when these technologies become commercially viable, it's not going to be a 10-year integration, a 20-year integration. It's going to be immediate, just like AI was. And so I think as auditors, we need to continue to be curious and maybe take our horizon that we're looking at things out a little bit further than we have in the past, because this stuff will hit us fast. And when management comes to us to say, hey, what do you think about this? We can't be sitting there going, I don't even know what this is, because by that point it's too late. Everybody else is ahead of us. So those are the emerging technologies I would throw out. Again, I could probably list off half a dozen more, but those are 3 examples that I think fall into those 3 buckets.
Okay. And you said that a couple of times. You said like, hey, auditors need to be thinking about this stuff. What is the action they should take from that?
I mean, at this point, for those shorter term ones, the AI, autonomous robotics, I think auditors probably need to actually start thinking about frameworks, thinking about how are we going to apply this? What are some of the controls and governance structures that we need to put in place? When you go out to a longer term one, like we're talking about quantum computers or, digital twins is another one that has had a lot of talk, especially CES just happened and that NVIDIA talked about that. But that's probably, 10 years out before it's really used wide scale. I don't think you need to start talking about frameworks, but I think you at least need to know, the term, understand what we're trying to do with those or what researchers are trying to do, and then go out to Chat GPT and say, hey, listen, I'm trying to understand quantum computing. When that gets rolled out, what impact is that going to have on business? And again, it's not for the standpoint of I need to audit this tomorrow,
Yeah.
but it's from the standpoint of when this happens, I need to be able to have a meaningful conversation. And especially if you're somebody new in your career,
Yeah.
you're going to be in business when this stuff hits.
I think it makes a lot of sense too to share that with the executives to go. I mean, imagine 3 years ago if you would have been the person talking to the executive team and going, "Hey, AI is like a real thing. It's not made up anymore. It's going to be here." The prediction on when, obviously, you couldn't really figure out, but I mean, there was enough kind of breadcrumbs to go, "Hey, this is coming. It's going to be real. Here's your potential impact. Like, we need to take advantage of this." As well as
Well,
understanding the risks and everything. But
yeah, so one of my big concerns that I see with AI is that we're 2 years out and we're still having very introductory conversations around it. What is it? How do we use it? Where should we apply it? Should we even apply it? It's like that boat has sailed. It is integrated into society and business at this point, whether we like it or not. And that's how a lot of these other technologies are going to be. When you can't be 2 years later going, yeah, maybe we should talk about this now. You got to be ready to talk about it when it hits.
all right, let's move on from. I'm sure there's people who are like, "Dude, if we talk about tech and AI anymore, I'm turning this thing off." Let's go maybe a little softer skill conversation here.
Yeah.
I think he's done a very good job building relationships to the point where like management comes to you now and says, "Hey, Audit, you're amazing. We need help with this thing." How did you do that? To me, that is very much a seat at the table type of situation, where they're seeing us as that trusted advisor, we could certainly say. And so, what did you do? I mean, like you came in, and I'm sure that wasn't just whoever was there before you. Maybe they did leave that impression on them, but I'm sure you've grown it to some degree. What's your strategy for that? Somebody who is struggling right now, build relationships with management. It's constantly them going, "Hey, we're audit. We got to audit this thing," as opposed to, "Hey, audit, come help us with this thing." What did you do? What can others do?
So I'll start with a story on this from early on in my career. I was at a conference, and this was back in early 2000s when one of the big conversations we were having was, how do we get a seat at the table? Right? We don't have it. We want it. How do we do it? And this whole conference was essentially structured around that conversation. And one of the keynotes is they brought in a CFO of a local company, and he spoke about audit, his impression on audit. And of course, I'm early in my career. I'm like, yeah, we need to see the table. It's ridiculous that we don't have it. And he completely burst my bubble, right? Because he sat there and he goes, let me tell you why you don't have a seat at the table. You all tell me what's already wrong. I know what's wrong. You don't give me solutions. When I ask you to help, you don't help. You say, oh, I've got this audit plan. That's not my plan. Maybe I can help you next year with that. I don't need people like that sitting at the table helping me make decisions. I need people who can actually sit there and say, yep, I'm in this with you. And so that really stuck with me when I heard that speech. I mean, at first I was just completely incensed, like how could he possibly say this about audit? And then the more I thought about it, I was like, actually, he's completely right. We don't give him a lot of insights except for to tell him what's already wrong. So I mean, I think when you say, we all say, hey, we want to be a partner. Yeah, let us be a partner with you. It's one thing to say it; it's another thing to show it. So I would say, really truly be a partner with your management team. We fought very hard to get that seat at the table at this point because of some of the changes that happened at the IAA with rolling out consulting into the standards and then departments taking that and running with it. We're now more and more so getting the seat at the table. Take advantage of that. And by taking advantage of that, what that means is, when somebody comes to you and says, hey, can you help out with this? The answer needs to be yes, right? You can't hide behind, it's not in my plan. I can't do that, whatever it might be. Now, when I say yes, that means you still act as an auditor, right? You're not going and making business decisions. You're not going and telling the business, here's what you need to do. And if you don't do it this way, then it's all going to fall apart. It's more of, okay, here's what I see as an independent view on things. And you can do whatever you want. However, based on my experience, based on what I see in the company and my ability to tie things across the entire company, here's what I think would be really good in this situation. And when you start taking things that way, I think that really drives management to say, okay, we can go talk to these people. They're not being overbearing, but they are still here to try and help us and guide us through this. I've worked in audit departments where the chief audit executive took joy in. We would go to audit exit meetings, and he'd walk in and just start lobbing grenades at people. I mean, you just sit there as like, one finding after another, and people are, they're freaking out because they haven't seen this stuff, or it's written in a way that they hadn't seen before. If you feel like that's how your department's going, get rid of that, because it's not a way to build trust and confidence with you in the audit department. Audits should be open book tests. People should know what's coming, and people should know what's coming at the end of the audit too. And then one of the things that I try to really focus on as we perform audits is being commercially focused. And so other auditors hear that and they go, well, our job isn't to drive revenue. That's true. It's not to drive revenue, but commercially focused can be compliance, right? So if we get hit with some kind of major compliance issue, a fine or, a legal letter or whatever, that can cost us a tremendous amount of money, not just in revenue, but also in share value. But then also, as you find stuff, is it increasing revenue, or is it preventing the loss of revenue? Or is it decreasing costs? There's nothing wrong with focusing on those things as an auditor. And I'm not talking about from a SOX perspective. SOX is a whole different thing. But when you're doing these operational audits, commercial focus can be very, very important in building that relationship with management. Because if you issue an audit report that's full of things that everybody looks at and goes, okay, I don't understand why I have to do this, but I'm just going to go do it because you told me to. Again, at the end of the day, management's not going to come to you. They're not going to ask you to audit things. They're not going to ask you to support projects. So those are the things that I've focused on so far. It's worked pretty well, But I'd be interested to know, Trent. You have a lot of these conversations. Anything else that you've heard people doing that are in similar situations?
So a lot of what we preach is, so you say commercial focused, we say opportunity instead of risk. So they're same side of a different coin. So I always try to speak to opportunity, and the analogy we always use is like with if you talk to like your personal finance person, they're always going to want you to get life insurance. Makes sense, right? And then they're always going to like invest your money and watch it grow and all that kind of good stuff. And like when we have those conversations, I don't really care about the life insurance stuff. I don't want to talk about that. It costs me money. It sucks. I don't see a return on that necessarily. But then when it goes, hey, this is what we did during the quarter, I go, yeah, that's way more fun. I'm more interested in that. And so to me, that's kind of the opportunity side versus the risk side. So I try to pose things as opportunities, and that's what I hear others do. And then the other thing being like you are an executive, act like an executive, help the rest of the executive team. And so usually that can be in the form of, and one good way to kind of think about it is after you put together your audit committee deck and you have like whatever your high risk issues or whatever, instead of just going, here's the issue, here's the issue, here's what you could, potentially recommend as solutions to that issue. I think you mentioned solutions, but as opposed to, all right, everybody, we found these problems. Good luck. We'll see you next quarter. We're going to give you more issues that you have to deal with. Offering some solutions to some degree to go, hey, we've thought about this. We've talked to our peers, or whatever the case is. We feel like this might work, or whatever the case is. It's something that I think works really well. It's something that happened to me. I think early in my career, I would just ask there's a particular senior. Any question I asked them, they would go, give me an answer before you come and ask me the question. Basically, you have the question, go try to figure it out, and then come to me and say, I think we could do X, Y, Z. What do you think? And so I've always tried to do that, and I think it's in a similar vein of, here's the issue, here's our opinion on that, here's what I think we could potentially do. And I know some people are going to hide behind independence. I guess you could walk that line as you see fit, but I've seen and heard that approach work really well. But it all boils down to just help the business and stop being the tattletales that we are sometimes seen to be.
Well, and I think you hit on two important things. One is for my team, whether it's, when I've had teams that are employees of the company or currently, consultants and contractors, if you're going to come to me and tell me something's wrong, have something in hand to talk about how we fix it.
Yeah.
Right. And that needs to apply for us going out to the business. We're going out to the business. We're saying, hey, this could work better. If they say how, you should probably have an answer to that. Because if you don't have an answer, they probably aren't going to have an answer either. So supporting them in doing that. And then one of the other things that you said that I think is really important in tying back to technology is finding use cases. So we've actually got a project right now. We get a lot of third-party statements in, and these statements come in all kinds of formats, Word documents and PDFs and Excel files and you name it. None of them are consistent in what they look like. And so we've got a team that one person on this team has to spend a ton of time going through these statements and extracting the data and putting it in Excel. And so I was talking to him, I said, hey, I've got, because I'm testing Copilot. I said, send me a couple of the examples. Let me drop it in Copilot and I'll give it, here's what I'm trying to get out of this file. And I'll see if it can intuitively find the data and extract it and put it in Excel. So then we can compare it to our internal data. Like that right there is something where, one, it helps me because I want to be able to do that when I do audits. It helps them. And now this person is going to tell other people whether or not it works. Like, hey, Eric brought this thing up. Maybe you guys should go talk to him because he's got this tool that we could use. And so I think finding those use cases and solutions and then taking solutions to the business is really critical.
We've seen a few now instances where internal audit has kind of led the charge with Copilot. It seems to be the most common one, to the point where the rest of the business and management's coming to the auditor going like, how'd you do that? We want to be able to do that. Can you teach us how to use this thing? Which I think is fantastic. And similarly, it's kind of an antiquated example now because of AI, but I always talked about how basically dashboards were a really good marketing tool for the internal audit department. And so like and I saw that firsthand. I built a dashboard, and from that, we presented it, gave it to somebody, whoever. Somebody else in the business saw it and they said, I didn't know audit could do that. Can you build something like that for me? And so that's why I was like even a bigger fan of analytics and dashboards in particular, was because of that, which the main reason I told that story is so we could segue into the next question. If it's possible, do you have like a scrubbed down version of the audit committee dashboard that you would be able to share with the listeners?
I actually went through and took some of the dashboards that I have and I anonymized them, and I took some screenshots just along the tabs on the bottom, which is what you're seeing here. So I'll show this, and this is obviously not my dashboard, but these are all the things for my SOX dashboard that I've got. So these are all the tabs that I can go through. Drill throughs has all the information, and the important thing to me is that I can come in and within 10 minutes of getting in the office, I can have a full understanding of what my audit department's doing. So I'll show you just a couple of what's behind these tabs. This one, again, there's a lot of data missing, a lot of details missing for the fact that I can't publicly share a lot of that. But what this is going to show you is what I look at every day when I come in for our SOX testing program. So it's a breakdown of the testing status by cycle, what our exceptions look like. Within this exception box up in the upper right-hand corner, you'd have the responsible area, the number of exceptions, and then it splits out how many are remediated, how many are not remediated. You have a table down at the bottom that shows you the entire structure of how we're testing. And then on the lower left-hand corner, you got a chart that shows you essentially the progression through the year, through the different phases, and then some tiles that I can look at and very quickly get some information that's important to me. Like, for example, how many exceptions do we have? How many do we have last year? What percentage of that represent as our total controls? And then how many do we have remediated? So this is all live data. And the nice thing about this is I've got the filters on the left-hand side that I can drill through. And then throughout all these graphs and charts, I can click on any component of them and it'll redraw the dashboard to show me specifically what relates to that. So for example, in the upper left, test stats by cycle, I could click on the red business process. It'll redraw the entire dashboard just for what is not started within the business process. So that to me is really helpful on a day-to-day basis, but I also use this quite a bit for the audit committee. So let me go back one. One thing that I do on all of my dashboards, and you'll see this on the bottom of all the tabs, is I've got my audit committee dashboards. So these are the dashboards that I take screenshots of and I put them into my audit committee deck when I do the updates or when somebody calls and asks me a question. These are not just viewable to me. Anybody who has access to the dashboards within the company, so it could be management, it could be executives, it could be control owners, they can see these audit committee screens as well. because I don't ever want it to be a surprise what I'm going to present to the audit committee. So these are always live, they're always available. So this is the testing update that I showed to the audit committee. It's a subset of what I had on that other dashboard. So again, it's really what's important to them. How's the testing going by the cycle? How's the testing going by the phase? Again, the tiles are there. For some of the audit committee members, they like the detail, so I've got the table there. And then what's our completion trend? So I can point to that and say, we're close to year end. We've got a lot still open. So essentially between now and the time we file, that line is going to go vertical because we've got a lot of things to test. And that then gives me the ability to also have a conversation about how much effort it takes to do SOX testing, not just for my team, but also how much effort it takes for SOX testing on the part of the business, because the business has to support all that. Behind that, I have the exceptions dashboard. This is the other audit committee dashboard that I put up. So it shows the breakdown of all the exceptions. I'm sorry, went the wrong way. There we go. This gives you a breakdown of all the exceptions. Again, the trees on the left-hand side would have the areas, control owners, what the breakdown is, and gives them an idea really quickly of what kind of exceptions we had for the year, when we identify them, when we target to remediate them, including which ones may roll into next year because, for example, maybe we don't have enough samples in this year to remediate it. So instead, that'll remain open for year end. That then is an indication to them that those are the ones that they're going to get memos on at the end of the year saying, we didn't close it before the end of the year, so we had to do an analysis to determine the impact on the overall financial statements.
From this, so there's going to be people who are watching this to go, I'd love we had something like this, but we just don't have the resources or the technical competency to build this out. And so maybe as a different way of thinking about this, for those that don't, is there a common question that you typically get from the audit committee? Like, do they typically go, hey, I want to know about this? And the reason I ask that is so that others who don't have this can kind of pre-plan, and when they go in to talk to the audit committee, they can go, hey, this is what I want, like something else they can add to their agenda that you're seeing and you're hearing from people who can see the data and what you're hearing from them, the questions they have.
Yeah, so if we step back to this last one, we'll talk about testing first. Like I said, sometimes we have members of the audit committee who want a lot of detail, which is why I have the table in here. But really what they want to know is, how's our testing going? What's still open? Is there a particular area that's still open, which is why I break it down by cycle? And then, hey, we're really close to the end of the year. What does it look like? So on our test 2 roll forward, you can see right now we're about 50-50 between complete and still open. So those are the questions I get related to testing. And then related to exceptions, it's what areas had exceptions? Are we going to have them all closed before year end? When did we identify them? And then sometimes, they'll want to talk to individual control owners, depending on, if they see one control owner has 60% of the exceptions, they might say like, hey, can we, find out a little bit more about that? But I will say from a technical standpoint, so I use an audit management software. This is Power BI integrated with that software, and I built all these myself, just kind of self-taught. So it's is much less difficult than it might appear by when you see these in their final product. There's there's tons of tutorials and everything else. If you can get the data and get it into a system like Power BI, it's fairly straightforward to actually be able to build these.
That's what I wanted to ask you, because it's always where do I get the data from? How do I keep up with it? And so that's what I was curious about. So all this data, you're going through your audit, you're doing, putting everything in your audit management system, your testing's in there, issues, all that kind of stuff. And then so you have your audit management system, and then within that's all the data. And then you just build a Power BI dashboard that sticks, let's just say, on top of that. And that's where the data is coming from. I feel like a lot of people are going to go, how do you get the data? And how do you keep up with all this?
Yeah, exactly. And most of the fields that are behind this, like for example, in this one, the testing year identified, the testing phase identified, I'm not going in and filling that in a field. In that system, when we mark an exception, the system on the back end is capturing all that data. So, a lot of this stuff you're seeing are fields that are being automatically filled in as we complete our work. It's just a matter of going in and finding where those fields are. And depending on your audit management system, I use one that's very common, that a lot of companies use. It's pretty easy to find the data once you start digging around
through. So this is something I talk to our clients about when they go, audit committee dashboard, and we want to pull up the dashboard during the audit committee meeting and have them be able to ask questions, and we can click around and do this. And I go, how much time do you have? It's like, oh, like 10 minutes. And there's always, the more people that you show something like that to, the more likely there's going to be that one person that goes, oh, click on that, and then and that and that, and you kind of go, why do you want it? And they go, oh, just curious. So I always recommend, like, don't give them during the audit committee meeting access basically to poke around in the dashboard or dictate. Maybe that's another way to say it. Don't give them the ability to dictate the meeting based on their just general curiosity. And I always say, similar to how you have it right here, take the screenshots and then you can speak to what you need to speak to, and things don't go sideways. And I think that's what you said, right? So what's your protocol for that? You give them access to the live dashboard prior, and then during the meeting, just have screenshots. Is that right?
So some members of the audit committee have access to the audit management software, and they can see these dashboards if they're interested at any time to pull it up. I've got one or two that will do that, and then I've got some that will never look at it in between. We have a pre-call with members of the audit committee, which is more of a general relaxed conversation where we go through stuff. During that call, I'll have the live dashboard up, so if somebody does want to dig into something, we can do that. But then the actual audit committee meeting itself is a screenshot. Now I'll have it up on my computer, which is not being presented, just in case somebody asks a question. I can drill down real quick, but we don't give the opportunity to have a drill down session with all the members for all the questions during the actual audit committee itself. Yeah. Um, so the other thing that I use this for beyond SOX is that's actually really important for me is document request tracking. Similarly, this is all in the audit management system. And again, I have an audit committee slide for this. So I can see in real time what are my projects that are out there, what are the documents that I'm tracking, what's the status of being submitted, because ultimately this is the front end of us being able to do our testing. If this goes late, our testing goes late. And similarly, I will present this to the audit committee for no reason other than to say, this is the front end, we're moving along. Plus, it gives me the opportunity to talk about how much work it takes to actually complete a SOX testing program, not just on the part of my team, but again, on the part of management. And the other thing it helps me do is have a conversation in front of the audit committee with the external auditor there saying, look, we have this many requests that we process. There's this many documents. Every control that the external auditor relies on us for is less documents that the business has to provide. And as you can see by this, they're already providing a lot of documents. So it gives me a little bit of leverage there, but more broadly, it just gives the audit committee the ability to understand how things are moving, what's involved with going through this process, and what ultimately we're doing to complete the program.
I like it. There's always the balance of take credit for what you did with also telling them what they need to know. And so I think this is a really good way to do that.
And I won't go into a lot of the operational audit ones, but again, I'll just show you. So this is the SOX program, but we also use dashboards on the operational audit. So this is the tabs that I've got for management action plan tracking. This is what I see when I go into it. One thing that's unique on this one that I really like is the lower left hand. It's a decomposition tree. I can take all the data and in real time slice it in whatever direction I want. So right now I've got it laid out by map owner, status, due date. I could flip those if I wanted to see due date first, and then who are the map owners that have those due dates. So the decomposition tree, again, delivered with Power BI. So it's not something that's, crazy that I went and bought specifically to have in here. A very, very useful tool. And then similarly, I have an audit committee update with here's our management action plans. And there's a second table that comes with this, that if there is a late management action plan, it gives the audit committee the details of what's in that management action plan. And then my status update from the audit management system of it's late, but we're okay with that, or it's late and we've got a problem with that. So the nice thing is not only am I giving them data that they can consume very quickly, but it also takes a tremendous amount of the workload off of me to manage the department, to prep the audit committee materials, and to get everything in front of management that they need to see. And I'm not having to deal with all the administrative overhead that goes with that.
All right, so we started off very technical analytics AI. We mixed in a little soft skills and even then to that point of how to get seat at the table, there were some technological solutions that can certainly help do that. And then kind of closed with some more analytics and tech. So I feel like we've covered a lot here. Is there anything else that you want to leave the audience with? Anything in particular?
I think whether we're talking about how do you become a key partner to managements, or how do you look at emerging technology, all these different things. Something that somebody told me, I don't know, 5-6 years ago that really stuck with me is you can live in the past or you can live in the future, but you can't live in both. And so, if you're asking yourself, how do I become a better partner of management? Start with the answer, start with where you want to be, and then work backwards from there. And then when it comes to technology, start with where things are going to be in 10 years and start thinking about what's going to be emerging. Because as auditors, it's not enough for us to be thinking 6 months or a year out anymore. Things move so fast that we have to stay ahead of it, because if we become that key partner to management, we're going to be one of the first people that they stop by to ask questions to, and we better be ready to answer it.
Hey everyone, thank you very much for listening to this episode of the Audit Podcast. Whatever platform you're listening on right now, I'm sure there's a subscribe button somewhere, so please hit the subscribe button there. If you're listening through iTunes or Spotify, feel free to go give us that 5-star rating. It only took me about 16 seconds to give myself a 5-star review, and it really helps to get future guests to come on the show, so we'd really appreciate that. Lastly, be sure to check out the show notes and follow us on all our social media channels, on Instagram, on LinkedIn, and on TikTok. Also, if interested, please sign up for our weekly newsletter from the Audit Podcast. Thank you all. Have a great one.